Right. So last time we were discussing the basics. So we discussed like what are the modes available in Python you to work with, getting help in Python, like what are the constants, the data types available in Python. Okay, and how do you find out the type in Python, and how to implement, how to use strings in two ways we discussed, and the reason for two ways also we discussed last time. And then when you have multi-line strings, so how do you represent? So those part we have discussed last time. And then we move on to the variables, variable rules, and then the keywords available in Python, and how the assignment works in Python, we briefly look at, yes, and then the statement in Python, arithmetic operations, and then order of precedence, then operation on strings, converter functions, and I think we have discussed input as well, yes, and then we were discussing the output, right? And while we discussing the output, I think this is the place where we have stopped. Can one of you confirm?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Imran, I already uploaded the first lecture video. Meaning like uploading the LMS, I tried multiple times. That was the reason why I have put into the YouTube, right? For some weird reason, I try a couple of times and then I decided to, host it in YouTube. But I try. So the question of Imran is like hosting or uploading the video in LMS, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. So I think this is the place where we have stopped last time. Yes. Can one of you confirm, please? Tilina?
Sir.
That is a place, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so we were discussing like outputs in Python. There are like, multiple ways. So I'm going to at least briefly discuss all the three. The first one using module operator, second one using a format, and the latest one using, what we call formatted strings, or we call F strings, right? Now, to start with, today, I'm going to like change my ID to Google Colab. So let me start and share with you. I hope everybody has a Google account or Gmail. So go to www.colab.research. colab.research.google.com. So, and usually you should get some interface similar to this one. Right. So the website is colab.research.google.com. Right, finished. Then choose new notebook. Choose new notebook. And you should get an interface like this. If you're done up to this one, can you please raise your hand in your reactions so that I know that you have completed this task. Right. Last time we used idle environment, and since we are going to work with data science, majority, developers, researchers, we, fond of using notebooks like an interface where we can share our codes, right? And then we can keep the notes as well. For example, my future handouts will be based on Jupyter notebooks, right? Right. Thanks. You can lower the hands now. Right. Now, so I'm going to name this. So you can also name this. Let's say I'm going to say session 2, since I'm going to make a note of this. MSc in data science and AI, right? So you can name it the way you want. Then I can have like two types of cells here. What you have already have is a code cell. So for example, here you can type whatever the Python codes that we have discussed last time. So for example, we can say, okay, print PJS. And if you run it, this is the run button. You should be getting the outcome. The first time it will create the virtual machine, so it will take some time for your first run, initializing it, and later on, yeah, now it's good to go. You can see the RAM and the disk usage here, right? And we are ready with this. So this is coding cells, right? Code. And then you can have text as well. In text, you can have like usually markdown, syntax here to type. Now, for example, if you want to like H1 or the highest level of heading, then you can have hash, for example, um, right? We can have Python programming, so you can see it's in highest possible heading. And then let's say MSc in right DS and EI, slightly small letter, right? So you can see the changes. Or else you can use these icons to type it the way you want. For example, I'm going to say, okay, University of Peradeniya, right? And if you want to bold, you can select and bold. Markdown is will be already given. So 2 stars. So now it's in bold, right? You can experiment this one. And yeah, so this is like a note now. Okay. So you have a heading. Right. Now you can change this. Now, for example, here, I'm going to, move down. I want to put this on the top. So I will click this move cell down, the arrow. Right. Now I'm ready to go. Right. Today I'm going to like look at formatted output. So let me delete this one. So I'm going to delete this cell. I'm going to add another text cell. And then I'm going to say, okay, formatted output. So this is my note, right? Good to go. Let me write some code. So to do that, I will take a variable a assigned with some number with some decimal places. And then when I say print a, right? Yes, I should be getting some kind of input like this. So the beauty is you can now, if you want, you can download it as a Python code. You can download as a notebook itself. And there are options available you to generate a note from this, like a PDF or LaTeX, template. So that I will discuss later on. Okay, if you have finished up to this point, can you please raise your hands in the Zoom? Anyone need some help? Always you can, use chat box. Samindi, how about you? Are you on the track? Imran?
Yeah, it's done.
Vijay Surya? Naomi?
Done, sir.
Okay, thanks everyone. Right, I think you're comfortable, right? So this is not that difficult. Right, now few things that we have already discussed. First of all, using module operator, right? Basically here, the first one I'm going to talk about, let me put a comment. So I'm going to use string module operator, right? So in this one, what happens? So usually you have what we call the formatting string. So that means under single quote, or you can use double quote, I guess, and then you can have the number. Now, depends on what you want, you can have the formatting string. Now here, for example, if you want to take as an integer value, so we can put D, right? And usually you have to provide a number as well, right? Now, for example, you can put a number here, let's say 7, right? That means we are going to have, slight, allocation for the number. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters are allocated and put into int format, right? So this is, a format. Similarly, we can also have other formats like, if you want to restrict into, let's say, 2 decimal places, we can say 0.2f, which will give you the limit to 2 decimal places. Right? And then you can put a number as well. That means that you can decide on the minimum number of characters you are allocated for this. For example, if you put 7, there's no change of this because there are 7 anyway characters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But let's say you put 12, you will see, notice the difference, right? Yes. Okay. So you can play around this one. Similarly, you can combine with whatever the string that you want. Like, for example, if I want to say, okay, print rupees, and then let's say you want to limit this, you can say the formatting string like this. Now, what happens here is, like, you are going to replace a with this format inside this formatting string. So we will have print rupees and then whatever the value, right, in this form. The final one, when you have multiple values, so for example, here I'm going to use actually the same value here. The first one I'm going to limit to 2 decimal places, and the second one I'm going to limit to 1 decimal place. and then we have to provide two values. And by the way, in this one, I'm going to use the same one. Remember that you have to provide it as a tuple, right? Tuples I will discuss later on. For the time being, make sure that whatever when you provide multiple values, you put inside the tuple, right? That's all you need to remember. And then, yep, we'll end up with like this. Right, I think already you have the note with you now, right? We can move on to the next one. Any questions that you would like to raise? Right. If you do not have any questions, I would like to move on to the next part. That is use of format, function. Right. Formatted output using format function. Now, similar to A, I will use the same number here as well. Right. And then the syntax is, you can say print, right? And within this, you have a formatting string like earlier, and with dot format. And then you provide whatever the variables, right? Okay. And this formatting is similar to previous one, except you will have curly brackets, and then you have some index. I will explain what the index means, right? So since we have only one value here, so you can put the 0 index, right? And then you can put the formatting, right? Now, when you say formatting, you can simply say D, like in previous case. Okay, sorry. This is for floating point. So I will put 2 decimal places, F. So which I will limit to this to 2. So decimal will not work for this. And then let's say the last one from the previous, if I'm going to put it in the same form, so I can say print, yes, 0 will be the first value indication, and 1 will be the second position. So this is the index actually. Index will tell you like the ordering of this. So the second one we are limited to first decimal, so 1 decimal place. And format, inside that we will have A and A, right? So with this one you will see here. Now I'm going to say that, okay, whatever the first value will be limited to 2 decimal places. The second one will be limited to 1 decimal place. Now, if you're wondering why we have index, actually you can swap these values without changing the, the numbers, right? Now for that, you can have 2 values. Now let me put it in this way. So let me take another copy, right? Let me say A, right? And then let me put 3.14. Hopefully it should work. Yeah. And then if you want, you can swap without changing this order by changing the index. So for example, here we can put 1 and we will have 0. Yep. You can see what happens. Right. If you're done up to this, and if you're okay with this, if you're comfortable, can you please raise your hand so that I can move to the next one? By the way, if you are like not very familiar with this formatting, get familiar, because in the next quiz, we are going to work on, a couple of questions on this. Right, next one. Samindi, I hope you have finished up to that point. Okay, thanks. You can lower the hands. Right, the third one, which I'm going to discuss, is the newest addition to the Python, which called formatting strings. This is very similar to the previous one, except, right? We use directly the variable name, right? So our variable is A from the previous, so we can say print, and we will have the formatting like this. We call F string or formatting string. And within inside, you will have curly brackets. And the formatting will be very similar, except for the index, you will have the variable. Now, earlier we have used to have zeros and ones and so on. So here we put variable. Right? If you want to limit to 2 decimal places, then after colon, you can specify the formatting string, right? As F like this, and you will get the formatting. And similarly, if I type the second one, I can save F string like this, right? And then I can have, okay, formatting string. I want to have format A. So with 2 decimal places as a floating point number. And next one, again A. This time I want to format with 1 decimal place, which I'm going to get like this. Right, good. Let's move to the next one then. You can stop me at any time you want. If you have any questions, please do post me and ask any questions, or else you can type in the chat. Right, the next one that I'm going to use is about the control structures. So let me have, control structures part in Python, right? So, but before we talk about control structures, I would like to talk about, another data type in Python, which is called Boolean type. Or in Python, we say it's bool, right? So in Python, like there are 2 values we use to represent Boolean, that is true and false. So it should be type it as type true, right? So if you say type true, you will get as a Boolean, right? Type false, again Boolean. Right, remember that when you have multiple values like this, it will give you the output of the last statement. So if you want to have both statements, so you have to use print. So I'm going to use print here, print type, right? The first letter should be capital. Yes, class will be bool. If you use simple, for example, you will get an error. For example, the same two, right? Just give me an, simple T and simple F, which will throw you an error, right? So this is not defined. Okay, right. So that's about the Boolean type. Now, having said that, let's look at some Boolean expressions. For example, um, you need this, especially in control structure, when you want to have a put up a condition, right? So we need to familiar with the comparison operators. So let me quickly go through them. Let me change to these two slides, right? For example, Boolean expression. So you can have in between the Boolean operators. In this particular case, we are going to check whether 5, whether it's equal to 3 plus 2, whether 5 is equal to 6. This true string concatenation, which is equal to the string given here, right? Now for that, we will have these comparison operators, which we can actually combine: less than, greater than, less than or greater than, less than or equal, greater than or equal, equal and not equal. Then the next one is when you have one condition, so you can also use logical operators that you can combine using the three logical operators, that is and, or, and not. Now, for example, if you want to check whether the value is in between 0 and 10, yes, you can use the AND operation, and then you can have two comparison operation to make sure that it's within the range. Similarly, operator. Now, for example, here, let's say we want to find out whether the number n is divisible by 2 or 3. So division, divisibility, we can check when you divide by a number. If the remain is 0, we know that it's divisible. So this first statement, just to check whether this is divisible by 2 or divisible by 3. If one of these evaluated true, the whole expression evaluated true for O. Finally, the complement of expression. So for example, if you have x greater than y, we check in basically x, whether it is greater than y. Not operation means opposite. That means we are checking whether x is less than y, isn't it? Right. So these are the operators. And now let's put them in practice. In control structures, basically, we are going to talk about selection and repetition. And in Python, we are using if, else, and elif statement for selection. And then mainly for and while can be used for repetition, right? So if you look at if in Python, so we have a couple of keywords. So let me explain with a simple example. Now, let's say we have a Python program to find the absolute value of a number, meaning like you are getting some input from the user and you can check whether the number is negative. If it is negative, we can make it positive, or we can remove the sign by multiplying that with -1, right? Okay, so let's try to program this in Python. Okay, let me go to the first one. We are going to look for the selection, right? Let me take a new code window, the selection. So remember that in this particular case, we are going to get a number from the user, right? And if it is negative, we know what we are going to do, right? So getting a number from the user, we have to use input function, and we can enter whatever the value you want to get it from the user. And we know that this will give you a string value. So that means we need to convert it to a number. You can use int or float. And the outcome of this, I'm going to put into a variable. So let me say it's number. Right, now selection start with if. So the point is, if the number is less than 0, that means if a negative number. So to find the absolute value, that means we can make it positive by multiplying the number by -1, right? And Python, there's no end if. So we can go to print. We can say, okay, we can say now some formatting like this. Right. Now, if you run this, you can see what happens. We'll get the number. It's as a number. Let me put +5. If you put +5, what will happen? It won't go inside. Simply, it just shows you 5. But if you use, let's say, -5, yes, then the -5 will be multiplied with -1, then this becomes 5. The output be the absolute value of the number. So you can see here, we start with if, and there's no end if, or there's no block. In Python, how do you handle this? Actually using the spaces. So either you can have 2 or 4 spaces depending on the different systems. In idle, usually it will be 4 spaces, right? In Colab, actually, we can, have 2 spaces to indicate this one. Right. If you are finished up to this point, can you please raise your hands? Right, good. So the next one, let me explain with the else part. Now for that, I will look at another example. But before that, let me talk about a little bit about indentation in Python. Now, white spaces is very important when it comes to Python, because in Python, this is what we use to group statement. Now, for example, if you take Python, C, for example, you can have brackets to indicate the block statement. But in Python, there's no way that you can actually represent that, except you have to use indentation, right? Putting spaces is very, very important, and you have to be very careful when you're having like white spaces. So the usual way is you use like 4 spaces to indicate different levels, which means in my previous example, if you have if statement, whatever the statement should come inside the if, you have to indent them, right? And normally when you make a mistake in this indentation, you will get an error. Right. Now let me explain this with here. Now, for example, in this one, let's remove the spaces and let me run this, and Python will tell us here there's an indentation error, which means it expects us to have indented block, which means you can either use like the number. I will normally use the default value available here, which is 2, but 4 is a standard if you use, idle environment, right? Okay, so a quick example with else part. So in this small program that we are going to develop, what we are going to do, I'm going to get marks for a subject, let's say, and then right, let me put -5. Yeah. And let me take another code. Right, the next one, I'm like similar to selection with else part. So, so in this one, I'm going to get marks of a subject. Let's say, again, I'm using converter function with input, and I will say enter marks, right? And depending on the marks, let's say I'm going to say pass or fail. So the condition I'm going to say marks, I'm going to check whether the is greater than or equal to 50. If it is the case, we'll say pass. Else part, sorry, else we can have print fail. Right now, if you run this, similar to earlier, let me put 85. Yes, should say pass. Now this will this will tell you, right, the use of else part. Again, there's no end if. Again, Python will understand the end of the block using the indentation. Finish up to this point. Please indicate by raise your hands, those who have finished. Okay, you can lower the hands. Let me quickly go to, nested statement, nested if statement. Now, in we can say nested statement. So in this one, let's take another example. Let's say I'm going to take temperature value of, let's say, water. Basically, right, I'm getting some temperature value for water, then there are different states. So for example, let's say if the temperature value is less than 0, we know water in ice state. So I'm going to print ice. Otherwise, that means the else part. In else part, you can have two more states. If the water is in between 0 to 100, we can say it's a water state. Otherwise, it will be in the steam or gas state. So for that, I'm going to use another if statement inside here. Let's say temp. I'm checking whether it's less than or equal to 100. If that is the case, we will say, okay, it's in water state. Else we will say, okay, print. Again, make sure not here, right? So all these, block of statements will be with the spaces. So you can see we have a if statement, right? So here is the if statement, start from here and ends from here. And within that, if it is true, then this is the piece of code we need to execute. If it is false, then this is a piece of code. And this piece of code is another if statement. And here we have condition is true. And this is condition is false. Right now, let me run. Let's put -5. It will say ice one more time. Let's see 105. Yes, so this will work. If you finish up to this point, can you please raise your hands? What we have just discussed is nested if statement. And I want to emphasize that, okay, the spacing, that means indentation is very, very important. And if you make some mistakes here, then you will, get an error. Okay, finally, I would like to discuss else if statement. In Python, else if statement is called elif, E-L-I-F, right? Now I'm going to copy paste the previous code because I'm going to rewrite the same program, but with elif. Right. When you have multiple if else like this, so actually instead of putting this, you can combine these else, if, and together. So what happens? I'm going to change this. This time I'm going to say elif, and then I'm going to check this. Right, the indentation we have to work it out. And then we have else part like this. So what happens here? So whenever whatever the value is given by the user, you check whether it's a less than 0. If not, you check whether it's a less than or equal to 100. If not, then you are going to say string. So if I run this, yes, let me put -5. Let me say 80. So that's what. So with that one, we finish elif statement. Right. If you have finished up to elif statement, can you please raise your hands? Any questions? I hope that you have already done these things in different programming language. Only thing is you need to learn the syntax. Right. Having said that, let's move on to loops, repetitions. So what we have discussed is the selection earlier, right? Let me put, repetition. And under the repetition, the first one that I'm going to use is a while loop. To understand that one, let's write a program. I'm going to print from 1 to 10. Yeah, this is a problem I used to write. Now, printing numbers from 1 to 10, you could have typed print 1, print 2, print 3, and print 10, and so on. But you don't have to do that. We can use some variable name I, and we can have within a while loop, right? So condition will be like this. So while true, if you put I, and let's say you have to provide the initialization. Let's say I start from 1 in my case, and this is print, right? And then after printing I, we know that we need to increase I by 1, right? And to limit this one, I can say, okay, I'm going to check whether whether it's less than or equal to 10, which is pretty straightforward, which will give you like, printing numbers from 1 to 10. So while loop also, please, note here, indentation is very important. Whatever inside the while loop, we will indicate using these spaces in the beginning, right? Same spacing. In this particular case, two spaces, which indicates that these two statements are inside the while loop. Right. If you finish up to this point, can you please raise your hands? Right. Then we have for loops. Yeah. So if you're a first time learner, a little bit tricky, but I think it's not that difficult you to understand. Right. To understand, for loop, we have to learn another function called range function. In range function works like this. Now, for example, if you say range, and if you put, okay, so in range function, there are 3 values actually: start, stop, and step, right? And then you have to, pick correct values depending on what you want to do. Now, for example, if you have only one value, then usually it's indicate the stop value. If you have 2 values, it will indicate start and stop, right? Now, this is the point. Now, when you have only one, that means few things that you have to know. The starts with 0 and step will be 1. I will explain what this means. And then here, if you have only one, step is 1. So, right, so this is what you need to know. Right, here is how it works. Now, in range function, if I say, let's say 1, 5, that means start and stop. it will start with 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 4, not including 5, right? Not including 5. Make a note of this. Similarly, if you have like, let's say, a range 5, now you know what will happen. Start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then range, yes, 1, 5, 2, for example, what will happen? Step is 2, which means if you start with 1, the next one is 3, right? That's all, because next one is 5. 5 is not included. So the 2 is the steps. So this is how it will work. Now, if I want to do the same, print in numbers from 1 to 10, can you tell me what is the range function should be? What is the range?
1, 11.
Yeah, it should be 1, 11, right? Right. Now I think I can directly go to the cell and write the same thing in a for loop. For loop starts like this. We can say for I some variable equals, sorry, for I in range. Within that, you have to do, what are the values. So in this case, 1, 11, if you want to print numbers from 1 to 10. And then within that, you can say, okay, print I. So what happens? Initially, the value will be 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, goes up to 10, right? This repeat exactly 10 times. Right. Done, finished. Please indicate whether we have finished up to this point. So for example, if you need like odd numbers, what should I do? Okay, sorry. So if you want to have like odd numbers, that is step you can change it to 2, you can play around. So that will indicate odd numbers. And then even numbers, you can say, for example, start with 2, which will go like this. How about if you want to go other way around, like let's say I want to go from 10 to 1. How should I put the range function?
1, 11, -1.
Yes.
Sorry,
What should
sorry,
be
I think it's other way.
yeah, it's starting value. What should be the starting value?
10,
Yeah.
0, -1. Yeah.
Okay, 10, 0, and then yeah, -1. Right, good. I hope now you know how to, work with the range function. Right. Quick question. Like I go back to the first one. Let's say I have 111, right? And if this will, print numbers from 1 to 10. What if I want to print some message 10 times? Let's say I want to print PGIs 10 times. So where should I change here? Yes. Instead of numbers, I want to just print PGIS 10 times.
In the print to string at PGIS.
Exactly. Yeah, you can change here. You can have PGIS, which will print 10 times. But there's a very simpler way to do this. If you know that if you want to print some 10 times, instead of putting 1,11, just put 10, because it goes from 0 to 9 10 times, right? So make a note of this, important. When you're writing loops, if you want to repeat something 10 times, just say for I in range 10, will repeat 10 times. For example, if you want to repeat 5 times, just put 5. It should repeat 5 times, right? So that about the range function. Yeah, if you have finished up to this point, can indicate so that I can move to the next one. Right. Good. Now the next one, I'm going to talk about the jump statements. Right. Under that, I'm going to first talk about the break statement. Right. So jump means usually we can change the operating point from one place to another place. Usually in assembly programming languages, we know that there's nothing called for loops, while loops. It basically you go from one place to another place in the memory, right? In here also, we can talk about break statement, right? Now let me type some codes and I want you to give me the outcome in the chat. Remember, I need everybody to answer this. So I'm going to put it like this. Okay, for I in range, let's say 10 times, I'm going to say print I. I need you to type the outcome in the chat. Okay, I got answer from Naomi. How about the others? What are the values we are getting? First value?
All ones.
Yeah, it's always start with 0, right? Why range 10? Remember? It's like range stop. Start with 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, up to 9 you should get. Right? You are comfortable, right? Okay, now I'm going to change the code a bit. I'm going to put a variable here. Let's say n. Then I'm going to say, okay, n equals int input, right? Let me say input a number. Not necessarily, but let me put like this. Now, can you tell me what will happen here? Any ideas? Let's assume that n is a positive value because I don't want to make any errors.
It'll take the input and go for a loop.
Yeah. For example, if I put like let's say 5. Can you tell me like what will be the output?
0 to 4.
Yeah, exactly. I think Naomi said it goes from 0 to n minus 1. Right? This one 0 to 4. Okay, good. Right. I think you are okay up to this point. Right? So if I rerun again, let me put 25. It goes from 0 to 24. Right, now let me put the break. Now if you say if, I will put if statement here. I greater than 9, break. So what break does, right? What break does, when the program reach break, it will continue after the loop. That means it will break the loop. Now remember, this break statement is inside the for loop. Whenever Python interpreter reaches the break, it will come out. Right, now can you tell me, right, if I run, if I put 25, what is the answer? Yes, I will repeat again. The break statement works whenever the break statement reaches there, it will come out from the loop. Okay, let me put it this way. While this is there, yeah, I think it works. Now the question that we are having something like this. Let me explain the break statement. Yeah, for I in range, let's say 10, let's say 25, right? If I say print I, and if I put break, can you guys tell me what will be the outcome?
0 will be printed, then loop will be stopped.
Exactly. So the first iteration will work, right? Should work the first iteration. It should print 0, and that's it. Because it means a break statement. Sorry about that, right? Understood? Anyone having questions? No? Right, now if I put like this, if I put a break like this, can one of you tell me?
0 to 9 will be printed.
Okay.
0 to 10.
Sorry, 0,
Yeah, it should be 10, right? Because
10, yes.
yeah,
10,
yeah,
greater than.
yeah, exactly. So it will be 10. Okay, right. Now I think we can go back the code. Now can you tell me what will happen if I put 25? Similar to previous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it will be exactly the
10.
previous one. It prints up to 10. 0 to 10, right? Let me rerun this. I put 5. What is the outcome?
0 to 5 will be printed.
0 to 4.
It should be 0 to 4, right? The range 5 means it goes from
Yeah.
6 to 4. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Tricky questions, but I think you understand this. Right. Okay. So that's break statement. Any questions? No. Right. Good. So that means we can move to the next one. So that we will talk about the continue statement. So the second statement that we are going to discuss under this. By the way, if you need time to take down the code, please let me know. Sometimes I might go faster. So the next one, continue. So continue is kind of a break, but actually it will not completely come out from the loop, but it will skip the remaining parts of the loop. That means it will go to the next iteration. Right? So let me explain. Now for I in range, now you are comfortable with this, right? And let's say print I, right? Continue, right? Print I. So can you guess what might be the outcome of this?
Zero to 9.
Infinity.
Yes, any more answers? Okay, there's a yes.
No difference. No difference. It will continue 0 to 9.
0 to 9, okay. But not 2 zeros, because there are 2 print statements.
Yeah, not 2 zeros.
Yeah.
Because it's continue, right? Whatever comes after continue will not, because when you say I, the first value will be 0, it will print 0, continue, you go to the next value, that is 1. It will print 1, continue. Okay, you go on like this, right? Okay, let me.
Actually, the last statement will not execute it.
Yes, last statement will not execute. Right. Now, for example, if I put, let's say, 5 in total, I can say, okay, total will be 0. And here, instead of that, I'm going to say, okay, I will say total equals total plus I. And at the end, I will say print total.
0.
Yes, it will be 0, right? Because this part will not execute at all. So no change of this statement. Okay, now let me change this. If, let's see, I mod 2 equals 0, I'm going to say continue. So this modulo means like you get the remainder. So basically you get the value, get the remainder. If the remainder is 0, you are going to say continue. Yes, others, I need, others also to talk, because, clarify whether you understand this piece of code, because later on we are going to write a little bit of, larger scripts. So if you do not understand any of these parts, please do let me know. Okay, let's start with the 0. First value will be 0, right? So what do you think? Will it print? Yes, it will print. Then 0 will divide by 2. The remainder is 0. Then it says continue. So that means it will not add up to the total. The next one is 1. It will print 1. 1 divided by 2 remain is 1. So it will not go inside the continue. That means it will add up to the total. The next one is 2. 2, the remain is 0. You meet continue. So that means it will not add up to the total. Then we have 3. The remain is 1. So it will not, meet continue. So it will add up to the total. So basically what will happen? What are the numbers we are going to put into the total there? Five. Yes, the odd numbers, right?
Yes, all the odd numbers. Total.
All the odd numbers. All the odd numbers will be added. So basically it will add 1, 3, 5, 7, and finally 9. You can check the answer. So I will run it. Yes. So it will print from 0 to 9, and finally we will get 25. Why 25? You will get 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 7 plus 9. Okay, so are we clear about continue? Can you please raise your hands if you are, complete this part, and if you're comfortable with continue, can you please raise your hands? If you need more explanation, please do let me know. Nilan, you are okay, right? I hope these things will, yeah, you have already done this. Imran, done?
Done, sir. Done.
Okay, yep, good. So we'll move to the next one then. So next we are going to talk about how we define functions in Python. Now let me say the other jump statements are written, so I will explain with function. So I'm going to talk about functions in Python. Now, when it comes to functions, now let's say I'm going to run a function like, let's say 2, 3. And this is not, we have not defined it. So we are getting a name error saying that, okay, add is not defined. So let's define this. So in Python, we call def and add. Then within that, you can provide an argument. So for example, I'm going to use 2 variables. Let's say number 1 and number 2, right? And within that, we can define what we should do with these 2 numbers. So simply we can say, okay, print number 1 plus number 2, right? So with that, we have already defined this. So this is function definition. And once you define it, right, you can call. Calling will be easier. You can say, okay, let's say 2, 3. We should get 5, right? And let me have another one. Let me 10, 56. This is function code. You are comfortable, right? Anyone is having issues? Right, okay. That is how you define the functions. Right, a small exercise. Okay, take someone's name and can you greet him? Like, let's say, hello, you get, you know, something like this. Let me give you the, okay, def. No, I want to say something like this, greeting. Let's say I will put Sampath, and this one should say, when you run it, the function should tell me like, hello, Sampath. If I say someone, it should say, hello, someone. Can you quickly write the function and share me in the chat? I'm waiting for your answers. The code to greet someone. Okay, Siraj done. Shanta done. Yes, Shanta and Siraj, you can raise your hands, and others you can lower the hands because I have not got your answers. Once you submit answer, please raise your hand. Janit, I didn't get your answer. Is Sachit submitted? Umesh submitted? Tanushka, yes. Yeah, I got Janit now. You can raise your hands. Telina, yes. Raise your hand. At least I need like 2/3 of class send me the answer. Gimhani did, yes, good. 2147, yes. Okay, right. We can continue. You can lower the hands, thanks. Yeah, so to define this one, we have to say def greeting, and you have to put a variable, whatever it is, let's say name, and then we have to, let's say, print hello. I have seen people using comma as well as use concatenation operation. Both are fine, right? So in my case, I prefer comma, and when you greet now, we can say, okay, hello, Sampath, right? So now we know the basics of defining function, right? Now just check, some existing functions available in Python, right? So in Python also, like for example, absolute value we have in ABS, right? Now this is to explain you function with return values. Now we have already have two functions we have defined, that is add, that we have already defined it, and the second one is like greeting, two operators, but they are slightly different with these. Like for example, ABS in Python will give you the absolute value, and if you're not really sure, you can just say help and ABS will give you the documentation about the help of ABS. Right now, there's one difference between this function in Python and whatever the functions we have defined it. Right now, for example, let me put this one. I'm going to say answer equal ABS 5. And I'm going to say print answer. Can you tell me what will be the outcome of these two lines? Yes, what is the outcome? It's 5, right? We are getting 5. We are getting 5. Okay, good. So let me write another code. I'm going to say answer, let's say 2, add 2, 3, and I'm going to say print ANS2. Yeah, what is the outcome? Yeah, first one we'll get 5. Second one, what is the outcome? If you type 5, you are mistaken. So let me run. We'll take 2 lines, 5 and 9. Now, can one of you explain me why in the previous case we get 5 only? Second one, I'm getting 5 and none here.
Add is not defined still.
Yes, in add, how do you define add? Let's quickly look at how we have defined add. Right? This is add number 1, number 2, and we say print. When we say print, it will not assign to any value. No return, we call it. There's no return. There's no return because we just say print. Because of this reason, when you say add 2, 3, what will happen? It will call the function. It add 2, 3, it will print 5. That's why we are getting 5. But nothing will be added to this one. So that's why in the second line, when you say print answer 2, in my case, you are getting none. None means no value. So if you want to change this, we have to define. How do you define? Let me define add functions. Let me say add 2 as number 1, comma number 2, right? And this time, instead of print, I will say return keyword. So this time I'm going to say, okay, return number 1 and number 2 addition. This is very, very important because now otherwise you will end up like this. So the previous add function that I have defined is just printed. No value will be returned. But usually in Python functions that we have already used, all of these, almost all of these has some return value, right? So the ABS function has a return value. Now this one also return value. So let's see now. Now this should work like this. So let me put in this way. So I'm going to say, okay, answer. Let me say 3. And I'm going to say add 2. Let's say 2, 3. And then let me print answer 3. right? This time there'll only be one value. What happens here, the value will be written and assign it to answer 3, and we will print it. Now, similarly, now Python built-in functions are there, right? For example, if you take function like max, will also be the same, right? But in this one, it's not fixed. You can have any number of values. For example, if you say max 2,3, it'll return 2,3. So if you have like say 4 numbers, arbitrary number of arguments that we can have, parameters we can have. So that part we will discuss later on, how you can actually create a function like this. For the time being, I think you are comfortable with the function definition. Right. Okay. If you are comfortable up to this point, can you please raise your hand so that I can move to the next one? So what we have just discussed is all the 3 jump statement we have completed. We have discussed, functions, function definition, right? The return function, all these we have discussed. Right, thanks. You can lower the hands. Okay, now next one, I'm going to give you a piece of code. I want you to tell me what is the outcome of this code, right? Simple one, right? Let me share. So this time I'm going to put a code A equals 0. And I'm going to create a function called change A, right? And I'm going to say A equals 1. Then I'm going to have 3 print statement, print A, sorry, 2 print statement, print A, and I'm going to call change A, and then I'm going to print A again. Without typing this in Python, can you tell me what will be the outcome? There are 2 statements, right? So that means there should be 2 values. So when you type it, I need both values. Okay, can you lower your hands? Right, those who say the output is 0 and 1, can you raise your hands? Those who says the answer is first one 0, second one is 1, can you please raise your hands? So basically what it looks is we have A0 and there's a function within that. We have an A, we are going to change it to 1. So when you say print A, we have not called the function and the output is 0. And when you say change A, you are going to assume that A is going to change it to 1. Is it? Okay. If you run it, you will see that there's no change. Now let me explain why we are getting this. There's no change. Output will be 0 and 0. The reason is when you define variable within a function, it will not visible to the outside. So this A is outside. This A is inside. So this is normally say it's local, right? So this is to say that what is inside the function is a local variable. So when you have local variable, it's nothing to do with what is outside, right? No effect. So keep this in mind. But let's say you want to do the exchange, right? This is called local variable because this A is inside and that A is what is outside A is totally different. If you want to, you can check the memory references using Python function ID. I think we have discussed at some point, right? Or else, let me write another code. If you want to visible what is inside the function to the outside, we say we have to define as a global variable. So global variable is what is within the function. You will say, okay, that A will be a global. So when you say globally, that means this will refer the same variable outside A. So which means this time when you run it, yes, you are getting 0 and 1. Right. If you are finished up to this point, can you please raise your hands? Anyone is having questions on local variables and global variables? Are you comfortable with that? Right. I think we have now completed the basics that we need to start with modules. If you do not have any questions, so let me take you to the math module in Python, right? So first of all, let me share my screen. Right, now I think we have the basics that we need to work with the modules, and this is exactly what I need to talk about the modules available for you to work with data. And modules are nothing but reusable functions. Now we have discussed how to define a function. We wrote a couple of very simple functions. So, but you don't have to really write functions as such, but most of the time you can use them. Now using, for that we will use a keyword import, and we specify whatever the library that you want to include. Now let's say you want to perform some Can you see the full screen? Because I'm not really sure whether you can see the full screen.
Yeah, we can see the full screen.
Okay, so right now I have two displays, but I'm working with one. Still I not got the power, so I cannot see. So let me know if the slides are not moving. Right now, so in Python we have a standard library, which means it's already there when you install Python. So these are like some of the selected functions available in Python. So Python math library. Now, for example, if you want to get the square root of, from math library, you can use, there's a function called sqrt, and you can provide the value. Similarly, if you want to get logarithms, you have log and log10. Trigonometric functions, we can have sine, costan. And if you want to work with radians, degrees, you have a set of functions and so on. Apart from that, the mathematical constant pi, mathematical constant e can also be used from the Python standard library. Now let me show you how you may call this, because it's the first thing we should understand, right? So let me go to Python. Right, can you see my notebook?
Yeah, you can see.
Yeah, thanks. So what we are discussing right now is using modules. So let me say modules. And what we are going to discuss is math module. Right? So for example, I told you that there's a function called square root function. Let's try to find square root of 2, and we don't have a function like this. Right? There are two ways that actually you can use a module. The first one, you can load everything like import math, right? So this will tell me we are going to load all the functions available in math module. And then you can say, okay, math dot square root, and then you can put like the value that you need. And when you run it, you will get the outcome, right? So the one way to load the module is import. You type whatever the module name, and the function that when you are going to access, you use the dot operator. That means math dot square root, right? So that will we use here. The next one is you can open or you can import only that functionally. So we can say from math, we can say import square root of function like this, which is sometimes prefer instead of, loading all the functions. If you're not, planning to use majority, then there's no problem. So better in that way. So in that case, you can just use square root function like this. So we can say square root of 2, right? So make a note of this from this point onwards, especially when I'm loading, the libraries, Python libraries, we will use either import with the module name. In that particular case, we are loading all the functionalities. So for each, we have to specify the library name with the dot operator. We have to say math dot square root of t. Likewise, if you want to access only that particular function, yes, it's direct. You can say from math import square root function, and then you can directly use square root of function. So that is actually you are loading into two, different namespaces, right? Okay, are we comfortable up to this point? Right. If you need a help, you can always say help math, because you have already loaded. You will have a large number, whole everything will be there. But let's say you are particularly interested in one particular function, then you can say, okay, help math dot, let's say, square root of function. So use this form where you will get only the square root of number, right? Okay, let me give you a small exercise on this one, right? Yes, I want you to work on Okay. Sine 30 in degrees. Okay, small question. Fine. Sine 30. It's in degrees, right? 30. Here, 30 is in degrees. Can you see whether you can find an answer for this one? If you want to see what function is available, you can type help math, and then you will get list of functions available. So now we need to use sine function, right? So why don't you check the help first? Help, let's say math dot sine. So let me first of all learn about sine function. Okay, you can say sine x, but remember, sine x as given in radians. Yeah, the problem is what we have is in degrees, I told you, which means I have to find out. Okay, let me check. Let me check all the functionalities available, right? Because what I have is 13 degrees. I need to find out. Okay, so this function. Convert angle x from degrees to radians, because what we need is radians, remember? Okay, so the first step is, yeah, we have to say math dot radians, and then we have to say 30, which will give us this in radians, and then you find the sine, math dot sine, like this. I think I have given you an answer last time why we are getting an output like this. The reason is some numbers we cannot exactly store inside the computer, but ours is very much closer to the actual value, that is 0.5. Right? If you round or in one decimal place, which we have discussed earlier, you are getting the correct answer. Okay. Any questions? Are you comfortable with the math library now? Right. Any questions? Right. Now that you are comfortable with this, let me quickly talk about data structures. Okay, so that next week onwards, we can directly work on NumPy arrays, right? So let me start data structures part. Now data structure means we can have different structures to hold data. If you're on to developments, you already know these things, right? So let's look at built-in data structures available in Python. Right, there are 4 data structures available. That means a list, tuple, dictionary, right, and sets. And usually for us, we should know list, tuples, dictionaries, and rarely we can use sets as well. So let me briefly explain those data structures. Let me first start with the list. Now, Python list is a special case because list can be defined with the the way you want, right? Now, for example, let me define some numbers. Let me define some numbers. Now, to do this, so I'm going to say a number list, that is a variable name. And to indicate this as a list, we are using square brackets, right? We are using square brackets. So let me put some values. Some numbers, right? Now, the difference is like, so far what we have discussed in variable, we can have one value, whereas a list under one name, we can have multiple values. So here we have 5 numbers we will have under the number list. So if you want to print it, we can say number list. Yes, you will get an outcome same way. And if you look at the type of the number list, this time now you can see this is as a list, right? New thing that we have discussed. Right, now if you want to know how to manipulate list, there should be some functions, right? So look at help. So you can say help list should give you all the functions is available, right? So you can see there are a lot of list is iterable, built-in mutable sequence, mutable meaning like you can change the values. And here are the set of functions available. For example, the first one, append, will say, okay, append the object to the end of the list, right? Count returns the number of occurrence of a value. Yes, remove first occurrence of a value. Sort, so likewise, you can actually see all the functions available in list. Now, first, let me explain to you how to access individual elements. Now, when you want to access individual element, usually we have to work with index value, that the first value will be 0, 7 value will be 1, third value will be 2, fourth value will be 3, last value will be 4, right? Now, if you want to access the first one, we use the index like this, right? I'll be using in the same. So I'm going to say, okay, print number list. We will say 0. Right. A quick question. If I need to access we are getting 11, right? That is 0. Let's say I want to access, let's say 45. How do you write the command? Yes. We can say, if you want to access 23, we can say a number is 2, right? If you want to access 45, we will say number is 3. Then last one, 44. Now, there will be an easy way to access last one. Okay, so this is the first element, right? And then number list 4 is the last element. Now this index is we call forward indexing. And there's an easier way that you can actually get the last element. Let's say you have the thousands of numbers. If you want to directly access the last element, you can use backward indexing. So this is -1, this is -2, this is -3, this is -4, and this is -5. So if you want to access last element, you can easily say -1. Again, very important. It's like sometimes we want to print last column of a data set, right? So we can say, okay, print number list -1, which will give us the same outcome. Yes, 15, 15. Right? I hope you understand how to manipulate the numbers in a list. Right. Next one. If you want to know the number of elements inside the list, you can use a len function. This is actually common irrespective of what data structure you use. So we can say len number list. So this will give you a number of elements. So when you run it, so there are 5 elements, 5 number of elements. Right. Another one would be like, okay, before that, if you finish up to this point, can you please raise your hands? Right, again, you are comfortable, I guess. I can quickly move on then. Right. If you want to print individual elements, right, you can easily do this saying for loop. We can say for I in number list. The beauty is, so in it's actually any iterable object, you can put it like in this form. When you put like this, it will print, each element at a time. So when I say for I in number list, so what happens there? For every number insert in the list, you are going to print one at a time, right? Right. Now let's look at like some manipulations. Now, when you want to manipulate, there are, a couple of ways that you can actually do. So here we have set for I in number list, print I will iterate, output all the numbers in the list. Okay, now adding can be done in 2 ways, right? So let me use help to elaborate this. List.append. Now when you have list append, this is what will happen. Append means you append the object to the end of the list, right? So that means number list. What do you have? This one. So let me put, okay, number list dot append 29, which I'm going to say that, okay, add 29 to the end and let's display number list. So if you rerun, now you can see 29 is added to the end of the list. To the end of the list. For example, adding a new data item to a data set, adding a new column, you can use this. Right. The next one is insert. Let me show you in help. Help list dot insert. Right. When you say insert, insert an object before any index. Right. So now we know index start with 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. So we can define where do you want to put the value. Right. Let's say I want to add 20 here. Right. Before 2. So this is how we can do this. We can say, okay, number list dot insert. What you're going to insert? First of all, the index value. Index should be 0, 1. I want to add. What do you want to add? Let's say 20. So if you do that, and if you print number list, so you can see 20 is here. Right? 20 is here. Now removal. Oh, before that, let me change values. Let's say, yeah. Here we have 15. Let me put 150. So to make it 15 to 150, we have to go by the index. We have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say 15 to 150. Right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Index is 5. So we can say number list 5. Right? And we are going to make it 150. And then again, I'm going to look at what is inside number list. So if you put it this way, you can see that fifth element, that is 15, marked as 150. So that is insert. We have 2 more to go. Right? Now we can talk about, deletions. So that part is okay now. Now, when you remember, I think we have discussed this earlier as well. Now, for example, if you say A equals 10, and if you say print A, this will print A, right? But if you say del A before that, what happens? This A will be removed from the memory, and you can say that it's not defined if you put del A. Now, similarly, in a list, what we have is number list, right? And then we specify which one to remove. Like I'm 0, 1, 0, 1, 2. 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, we can say number list 3. Right? So number list 3 means 20. We can say del number 3. So now if you print number list 3, okay, sorry, I put number list because we delete 3 earlier. So I think I will get an error because, okay, so now you see, let me start from the beginning, otherwise. So here is the list. Yes, we'll append, we'll insert, we'll change the values. Okay, we'll delete, right? So this is how we are removing items from the list. Okay, I think this is enough for today. I think we have covered a lot more, starting from input, output, control structures, and finally we came up to data structures. I will have a very brief discussion on the other data structures in the next week. Right, until then, goodbye everyone, and I'll put the note and the video on LMS. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome.